Death? There, I said it. It's a topic many of us avoid, but we probably shouldn't. So let's talk about it creatively. Next week, Boulder Rotary is going to welcome Sue Mackey for a refreshingly candid look at end-of-life planning beyond the traditional. We'll learn about water cremation and something called terramation, and some surprisingly joyful ways people choose to be remembered. It's thoughtful, it's a little unconventional, and it might change the way we think about the whole thing. Boulder Rotary, come curious.
My new knee stood the test. Okay, I am so excited, really, to introduce my colleague and good friend, Sue Mackey. Sue helps people thoughtfully prepare for the end of their life, and so that the end of their life will be in accordance with their wishes. And she also endeavors to have people prepare to share those end-of-life thoughts and wishes with their family members. So, as you can tell, many of you know I've been part of the Conversation Project for about 13 years, and the work that Sue does certainly augments all of the work that we do at the Conversation Projects. Sue, though, has a business, and it's called Out-of-the-Box End-of-Life Planning. And within that company, she helps people prepare an exit file, a very comprehensive file of all of your documents that encompasses all of the things that your loved ones will need to know after you die. TK and I both have an exit file, and it sits right next to our financial planning file in our closet, and our family members know exactly where it is. So I would encourage you, if that's something you haven't done, to talk to Sue. Sue is a certified Thanatologist. How many people know what that is? Okay, a handful of you, medical types. So Sue is an expert in many things surrounding death and dying. She's also a trained death doula, and she has served for 6 years as the president of the board of the Funeral Consumers Society of Colorado. And I didn't know about this organization until Sue became involved, and then I started tuning into their periodic educational presentations, and they're very fine. Sue enjoys leading workshops, and she enjoys working with individuals and with families. And in her spare time, she hosts death cafes, just in case, she had any spare time. These death cafes are really quite interesting. So today, though, Sue is going to talk with us about options for disposing of your precious body after you die. Sue Mackey.
Oh, all right, we gotta get this down to my shrimpy height here. It's so nice to be here. Constance, thank you. That was quite the intro. A lot to live up to there. Let me know how you are as far as hearing me. That's okay for now? Okay. And I gotta see my slides down here. So this is gonna be kind of a quick and concise overview of your disposition options when you die, but I'll talk for 20 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes of question and answers, and I'm also happy to hang out afterwards if anybody has questions beyond that. So this is how it usually goes, historically. If this seems familiar to any of you, I'm assuming that's why you're chuckling, and so just to be official, this is not a plan, and we really do need to plan for this occasion because it's going to happen to every single one of us. It does have to do with how we feel about our bodies. Is our body just a useful tool for life, and it doesn't matter what happens to it afterwards? Is it a sacred vessel? Is it something to be memorialized or honored? those are questions that come up when you're making these kinds of decisions. And this is how it traditionally has gone, especially at the time of death. When a person goes to a funeral home, they are, in the past, not too distant past, it's always been just, do you want burial or do you want cremation? And the good news is we now have, especially in Colorado, I'm like really proud of us as Coloradans that we have introduced 2 other much more environmentally friendly ways of disposing of our physical body beyond what my husband's choice is to me, to stand him up in the compost bin and pull him out to the curb. So yeah, for those of us who have spent our lives trying to be conscientious and recycling and such, we have some other options beyond the conventional. So briefly, this is what a conventional funeral might cost us. This doesn't apply so much to Boulder County. I think we're at 75% at least cremation, of people choosing cremation over burial. I'm not 100% dissing burial because it's very core to some of our traditions. You know, if it's the way we were raised and the way our families were said goodbye to, then it's highly appropriate. But know that it is the most expensive option, for starters. And the funeral directors will quote you a price of around $8,500, but what they're leaving out is this further list of things that are necessary to have an actual burial, which is, you know, buying the plot, buying a vault that could be close to $2,000, the cost for opening and closing the grave, the flowers, the memorial service. So we're talking more like $15,000 or $20,000 for a burial. And the additional piece of burial is that it is not very environmentally friendly at all. We are burying a crazy amount of price of non-renewable hardwoods, of metals, into places that they will be interred for eternity, and those cemeteries need to be kept up with fertilizer and water and blah, blah, blah. So people often then, part of the reason they just refer or defer to cremation is because of the less renewable resources and such that are used, but it's also quite a lot less expensive. So it uses less non-renewables, but it isn't that much less carbon intensive, because to do a cremation, it takes a couple of hours of keeping the body, flame on the body for up to 1,700 to 1,800 degrees inside the machine. And that machine is vented to our environment. So everything in the body that gets burned goes up the chimney and goes into the environment, including the mercury in our teeth, which is one of the reasons we have mercury in our systems from eating fish and such, because that mercury goes up into the clouds, rains on the oceans and the streams, and we eat the fish that have been swimming around in that mercury-laden water. Quick mention as far as the Funeral Consumer Society. Cremation varies in price and I'm talking about a direct cremation, which is having the body picked up, taken somewhere else, cremated, and you get the remains delivered back to you where you pick them up. The pricing can run between $900 and $4,500. It's the same process in all cases. So I highly encourage people to do their planning ahead of time. Research different options in your area. You don't have to do it in your town. Any place drivable is fine, but check out what the pricing differences are, and also the way you're treated and such certainly matters a lot. So, and one other comment about direct cremation, which is our first choice in Boulder County and is becoming more and more popular throughout the country, is that it has kind of disconnected us from death even further than we already are, because it can be seen almost as drive-through dying. The body just disappears, it's whisked away, and you're left standing there going, what the heck just happened? And then you end up with a box of cremains. The upside is that you can do a ceremony or something after, on your own timing afterwards, which is a nice feature. So this is what cremation looks like, fire cremation. And I'll be differentiating fire from water, which is where we're headed. This is what the machines look like for a fire cremation on the left-hand side, with the caskets ready to be moved into it's called a retort. We don't usually use wooden caskets for this purpose unless you're talked into that by a funeral director. Cardboard is perfectly adequate for this purpose and keeps less schmutz up in the air. On the right side is what it looks like after the fire cremation is complete, and what you're seeing is bone fragments there. And that's what's ground up and then returned to you as cremains. So any of you who have scattered ashes, they're not ashes at all, it's actually ground bone. And I want to mention one experience that maybe many of you are not aware of, which is the opportunity to witness a cremation. I mention this because it impacted me a lot and my family when my father died, that we went to the funeral, to the crematory, which, as you can see from the pictures, is very industrial. There's nothing warm and fuzzy about a crematory. But we went, and there was a room where we could spend time with him again, and then we walked down the hall with his body in a casket to the crematorium. And the five of us were able to stand around his body in the casket and say a little brief prayer, and then we all pushed his body in the casket into the machine, piled our hands on top of each other to close the door, to push the button to close the door, and piled our hands on top of each other to push the button to start the flame. And my siblings, who were really hesitant about this whole idea of mine, walked away saying, I wouldn't want anything different. We felt like we had walked the way with him. We were able to accompany him all the way up until it was up to him or his whatever to be transformed by the flame. But now we have water cremation, which when my father died in Illinois, and still is no water cremation there. I think there's 28 states who have it available, and not all of them have actively used machines. So this is what the machine looks like for water cremation. It is a tube sort of container, a cylinder, that the body goes into, either au naturel or wrapped in something organic like silk, a silk robe or silk wrap. And the difference, there's a lot of differences between fire and water. The biggest difference is that it utilizes only 1/10 of the energy that the fire cremation uses. So it is much, much less energy intensive. And some of the machines are even up to 1/20th the energy use of a fire cremation. It's low heat. The body is in this container. There's some water added. There is alkaline in the form of potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide, which is food grade that we use in beauty products and such. That's introduced into the container also, and the container then rocks, and so that the water flow completely covers the body. And I've had more than one funeral director refer to it as your last spa. It's a much more gentle process of decomposing the body. It still happens in a matter of 3 to 4 hours. But what you end up with at the end is you still have bones that did not completely decompose that will be removed and ground up to give the family cremains to do something with. And there's also leftover water. There's the water because it's been completely contained. And that water carries really truly the full essence of the person. There's no DNA or RNA. All of any virus, bacteria is completely dealt with, so it's completely sterile. But it is a really, really powerful plant nutrient. so that it's referred to as an effluent. And there was a couple in Lafayette who the husband died suddenly. He had been a master gardener. And so his wife had him water cremated. And at that time, there was 35 gallons of water or effluent that was the result of the process. She had all 35 gallons delivered to her home, had all of her family and friends over, and they did ceremony in the backyard, and they watered all of his plantings with him. And so it was extremely meaningful. If you are not going to take it to that degree, many families just will take a representative amount in a mason jar or something and use it on a particular plant. It does need to be diluted and such, but because it's so concentrated. If the family's not interested or they only want a little bit, then the funeral home will offer that effluent to organic farms, organic flower farms and organic animal feed farms. The legislation was written that it couldn't be used on human food. There's actually zero reason for that, technically, but there's just, the ick factor. So it can be utilized in these organic farming situations. And if the organic farms don't need any more of the effluent at any given time, it does go down into the sewer system, which sounds kind of yucky, except for the fact that the water plants really, really appreciate it because it's very alkaline, and it helps their process of treating the water at their plants. So the other thing that I find very appealing about water cremation is that all of our fillings come through intact. So instead of the amalgam, silver fillings being dissipated into the air and releasing the mercury into the clouds, the amalgams come through intact, so they're recyclable. The gold fillings come through intact, and you can ask your funeral director to have those. They're worth something. Some of us have like a whole lot of gold crowns or whatever that have value. And your implants, your knees and your hips, they come through in pristine condition, and they are reusable. Not here in the States, but they're sent to third world countries where they can be used to give someone a knee replacement or a hip replacement and such. Even breast implants come through intact for whatever that's worth. The cost, everybody wants to know the cost. The pricing structure around here has changed, and it used to be that water cremation costs more than fire cremation because they have the extra expense of another machine and blah, blah, blah. But I just have been looked online last week, and I see that the Natural Funeral, which is the company in Lafayette, right here in town, downtown, they're the ones that were forefront of offering water cremation. They are now at the same pricing for water cremation and fire cremation, which is $4,400. Not inexpensive, but if it's a reflection of your values and such, that's to be weighed into that decision. There's another company in Denver called Be a Tree, and she offers water cremation for $39.50. And the only other machine that we have in Colorado is up in Fort Collins at a mortuary called GOES, G-O-E-S, Family Mortuary. And their pricing for water cremation is $28.95. So, wide variant, different offerings in the 3 different places as far as what they have to offer as far as memorial services or body care and that sort of thing. But so that gives you a general idea. And there is a difference between the machines that the Natural Funeral uses and that GOES and Be a Tree uses. GOES and Be a Tree uses quite a bit more water and takes longer. They use lower heat, more water, and it's a longer process. And then Natural Funeral has a higher heat and a shorter process for their water cremation. So what can you do with the cremains from fire and from water? I'm sure many of you have experience with this, and we'll just kind of run through. Certainly, cremains can be buried, and the cemetery will charge you for that to open the hole and such to put the cremains in. I have heard of people sneaking in the dark of night and scattering their brother or whatever on top of mom's grave or whatever so they can be together. It's what you do with the cremains is just so much about what gives you as a family or an individual comfort around honoring this person. We all know about columbariums. There's urns that it's generally advised not to purchase your urn from the mortuary because they will be generally higher priced than what you're going to find online, or using grandma's cookie jar, with a lid on it works just fine. You don't have to have something that's labeled as an urn. It can be a Tupperware container for that matter. You will get a cardboard box with a plastic bag inside of it, and that's the usual for both processes, fire and water. And I have a picture of the little vials here because that's something that my family both of our parents, we had little vials filled with their cremains, and then we had them to use, like I scattered some of my mom's cremains on the poppies up at Chautauqua because she loved poppies. And my brother carries my dad in his pocket when he golfs, and when he has a really great shot, then he scatters a little of Dad's ashes down in the cup. So, it's all a matter of just your creativity. Biodegradable water urns for someone who's water loving. This is a beautiful option. All of these urns are filled with, you put the cremains inside and they're made out of paper, so they get soggy and they end up sinking out in the ocean or whatever body of water you're releasing them in, and they become fish food. And there's cremation jewelry. You can be made into artwork, and eternal reefs, which are a wonderful contribution to our reef system that's failing. The cremains can be incorporated into the concrete of the reefs that are being placed around the coast of Florida and other places. So the last, another option, a big deal here is terramation, or body composting. So the terramation process is offered only through the natural funeral, though other mortuaries will offer terramation and water cremation on their price list. The process is all being done through the natural funeral and their affiliated companies. Body composting is fairly new. You can see from the slide, the body is laid into a container on top of hay and alfalfa and straw, and then there are microbes introduced to the container. The body's covered with more natural materials. There can be a ceremony called a laying-in ceremony for this process if the family desires, and then the body is left in the container for about 4 weeks. Towards the end of that, they do need to remove the bones and again grind them in order to incorporate them back into the container. So after a month, the body is fully decomposed, and then it takes another month for everything to settle out, alkalinity-wise, I believe. And what you end up with is a full cubic yard of incredibly rich soil. So people will take this soil or compost and use it in their yards. They will donate it to conservation areas where the soil needs to be amended and improved. And it's become incredibly popular. They are growing and growing at the Natural Funeral with this. It's not considered burial because the body obviously is not being put somewhere in the ground. It's just, it's actually a solution to urban sprawl and the non-availability of land, because with cemeteries, we're taking up a lot of land space that generally can't be used for anything else. Cost, $9,900. If you want to include a viewing or a wake, it's$10,900. And if you'd like to be present for the laying-in ceremony, watching the body be placed into the container, and then also a laying out ceremony, as in having that soil then released from the container and left on the ground somewhere. It's $13,900, I believe. And this option is something we've always had. It's what we always did up until about 150 years ago, which is natural burial. You dig a hole, you put the body in, and you cover it up. And so it's becoming more appealing to people, wanting to go back to nature more. And what's appealing about it is that it does not use, there's no embalming, there's no chemicals, there's no vaults around the casket in the ground. So you use a biodegradable casket made out of, there's lovely caskets made of pine beetle kill by a gentleman up in Longmont. You can use a shroud, you can use a cotton bed sheet or favorite quilt, and you can bury on your own land. If you live rural, you may start a cemetery in your backyard. You just have to you have to register it on your deed, on your land deed, which may or may not be an issue when you go to sell your property, that there's body or two in the backyard. But as you can imagine, if you don't report it and someone buys your house and they go to build a shed or something and they dig a hole and they find human bones, there's a big issue. So just so you know, you do have that option. This is the difference between our conventional burial and natural burial. You see, natural burial is much shallower, which is much more efficient at actually decomposing the body naturally, because it's aerobic bacteria that decomposes the body and processes through the viruses, processes through chemotherapy and medications. They live in that top 3 or 4 feet of soil. And when we bury deep, which is what we do when we do conventional burial, that bacteria is not available. So the decomposition process is not, well, none of it's pleasant, okay? But it's an entirely different process when a body is buried deep. So you can see that the body is placed less deep, and the natural funeral has places where you can be buried naturally. They charge $5,900 for their end of it, but then there's the cost of the plot and the casket and et cetera. I think I'm running close on time, am I not? Okay. These are just, let's see here. These are some examples of green burial containers, and as long as they'll decompose along with the body, they're fine. And this is a picture of our most convenient green burial option, which is up in Longmont, North Longmont, north of Highway 66, called Foothills Garden of Memories. And it's just prairie, nothing fancy at all, but they're not running lawnmowers, they're not running sprinkler systems, and the body is buried directly into the ground there. They have a Jewish section there also. Jewish burial is always green. That's mandated. And then your very last option for being very environmentally friendly is to donate your body for medical research or for scientific research. And that's a whole nother conversation, but not to be confused with organ donation for transplant, that you might have a little heart on your driver's license for. And yes, even at our age, they have use for us. They'll take our corneas, and they love aged skin, because the collagen is not stretchy anymore. We don't have the collagen anymore, which is what we don't like, but it's very helpful in treating burn victims and that sort of thing, because it's not so stretchy. It'll stay in place. So organ and tissue transplant is one thing, but if you do that, you still have to do a body disposition, and you still need to take care of that yourself. If you donate your body to the anatomical board, in the Colorado Anatomical Board for medical students to do research on you, or you donate to Science Care or someplace like that, where they provide hearts to heart surgeons or feet to podiatrists or that sort of thing. In both of those circumstances, whatever is unused is cremated and returned to the family at no cost. So it is a choice that sometimes people will make because they don't have the funds to afford a funeral. And that's that. How'd I do? So I would imagine there are lots of questions. Back over here. Oh.
Thank you, Sue.
Sure.
A few months ago, the New York Times reported that at a university in Tennessee, a man had donated his body, and the surgeons started taking it apart, and the guy woke up. So this raised the question of what is the definition of death, because he had already passed the cardiac test and the brain death test. And reading the story disabused me of the whole idea of cremation. So I wonder if you know if there's any further research on this, because this article they went into certain universities are researching the definition of death, and it may take a little longer for people to die than we used to think and what the law seems to think. Do you have any comment on that?
Okay, two things here. One is the definition of death, and yes, that's an ongoing conversation in the ethics world. It traditionally has been cardiac death. If your heart's not pumping and your lungs aren't breathing, you're dead. But we also have brain death, where the brain stem is non-responsive or whatever, but the body is still viable. That's the situation whereby they'll do procuring of organs, where in order to donate organs for transplantation to another human being, you have to die a brain death on machinery, because that's what keeps the organs and everything viable enough to be able to be transplanted. So I can imagine where there could be a situation where that happened. I didn't read that article, and I don't know what to say about that. It's a rare thing, and if someone is brain dead and is not going to have any quality of life going forward, aside to be a stored body in a facility that's kept, artificial nutrition and et cetera, keep the body alive. For me, I'd say, okay, well, it's okay, because I'm not wanting to live like this anyway. But I don't know what was in that article. As far as donating your body for science, that would not happen, because the body is embalmed to the extreme in order to be utilized by medical students as their cadaver for 2 years of their schooling. So once you're embalmed, you're not waking up. Did I answer your question, sort of?
Both my husband, Dick Bedell, and I have donated our body to the Colorado State Anatomic Society. Dick is no longer here, so I can tell you what happened to him. The body was picked up. It was treated with respect. It was used for 2 years by medical students who are going to be saving lives in the future. There was zero cost to us. At the end of the use of his body, we were given the option of bringing his remains back to dispose of, having them cremated and disposed of there, or having them cremated and the remains given to us. I am pleased that Dick made this decision.
Thank you for that. I understand that. They are incredibly respectful through the medical institutions and in being grateful for the donation of a body, the bodies that they receive. So,
thank you for being here today. I thinking that you may have heard about this. In Lafayette, the Lafayette Cemetery is now sort of full, and they're having a hard time figuring out, because people were buried there over 100 years ago, where plots are. And so is that happening across the country, or have you heard of other things like that? And do you know about that story?
I just recently heard about what's going on at the Lafayette Cemetery, and I think one of the issues is there are Native Americans buried there unmarked, and they'd like to be able to return their remains to their native land, and it's a process to have to figure out. Yes, I imagine the way we used to do things. I mean, sure, many of you have walked through historic cemeteries, and things are falling down and falling apart, and with infants and children, there's often just a little headstone with a name, and they were not burying the way we do now. They didn't put the bodies into caskets, into vaults to create more of a demarcation and such. So yeah, I imagine that there are issues with older cemeteries and trying to identify who's there.
Do we have time for one more question if somebody in the room has a question? All right, Dara, you're up. Thank you.
Sue, I was asked to respond to your presentation today, so we'll wrap things up now. I'd like to define or tell you what came up for me as I listened to your presentation, and that is fascinating and informative. So we really appreciate that, as well as your style of presentation. This is kind of, as you pointed out, a testy topic, and we have a societal culture that doesn't really want to discuss death and dying and really learn about it like we all need to. And I think the style of presentation is really, really important in that process, as you pointed out. Having led hospice organizations during the last 25 years of my career, there were certain comments I heard repeatedly. I wish I'd heard about you sooner, and you told me what to expect. That's what you've done today, giving us insights into options for care of our, as Constance pointed out, precious bodies in respectful and caring ways when death occurs. An inevitable and tender time in all of our lives and for those who care for us. I'm walking away thinking, water cremation, that sounds pretty cool. So thank you. And in your honor, and with appreciation for your time and efforts today, we are donating 100 doses of polio vaccine to Rotary's long-standing and ongoing efforts to eradicate that dreaded disease. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I honor all of you for showing up for this topic, since it's something that many people run and hide from. And I hope that maybe it's opened your eyes to some other possibilities for you. So enjoy your pre-shopping for your own funeral.
And then, Sue, in addition to the certificate, we would like to, you may or may not know, so just Boulder Rotary Club, we're part of District 5450. In Rotary, there's over 46,000 clubs in over 200 countries, with about a little over a million folks who are dedicated themselves to service above self. In a moment, we're going to run a brew, and you'll see what our club is doing recently. But in appreciation for speaking to us, I do have the Rotary Speaker's Coin here to present to you. On the back is the 4-way test, which is something that this club closes each meeting with. And in about 18 minutes, our friend Don here will lead us into 4-way test. So feel free to stay with us until the end of the meeting. Yep, thanks.